Yeah. Please take us through the mandate of the LCA.
Ah,
Yeah.
the mandate of LCA is as prescribed in the Communications Act 2012. Uh, Basically, it's to regulate the telecommunication sector, the broadcasting sector, and the postal sector.
So, how mostly the the media we have in the country is mostly the radio stations and the newspapers, and quite often people have been complaining that they have been seen to be taking sides, especially in politics. How does the what role does the LCA play in that part, and what is expected from those radio stations?
Okay. Uh, with the radio stations, because it's part of the media, first of all, we expect that those who are in that industry are professionals in their field. They are aware of their ethics and their guiding principles. Yes, we have had challenges in the past with the issues you mentioned, especially on the reporting, the balanced reporting. But we do have the legal instruments to enforce that. But recently, what we did was to take a different approach and say, in the last 20 years or so, we've mostly been relying on the legal instruments for compliance and enforcement. But the success was limited. And we had a discussion with the broadcasters to say what is the problem and how the problem can be addressed. And what we identified was that the issue of capacity was a major one. So that is why we took a different direction altogether to say, let's walk the journey together towards professionalizing our media by introducing the workshops that were run quarterly. And we were in the process preparing for really providing what I would call basic training to all the presenters so that they can understand the principles of what they're doing and stick to their ethics. So that's how we ended up with that training that we have organized with Limpopo University to make sure that we capacitate all the broadcasters. And we have taken it further. We are working also on how we can also capacitate the station managers because we understand that even if the presenters are knowledgeable about what has to happen, if the management is not in the same wavelength or maybe you do not share the common understanding, we may still have problems. So going forward, what we'll also be doing is to also engage the station managers and provide them with some capacity building training.
Yes, that on that note, the most problem we face in the media is that we don't have enough resources, or we rely on the private sector for advertisements. So they in turn sometimes they capture the media. In that, if you are my primary advertiser, I cannot write anything negative about you. Uh, is there any way that the LCA can balance the two, or is it there's nothing the LCA can do in that part?
Okay, as part of addressing that, we addressed it through training because one, it's easy to be captured by somebody because it's advertising on your station. But by and large, it's putting your eggs in one basket. If that person no longer becomes successful, really you lose your source of income. So the best way is always to stay professional, because when you are professional, you are sure to attract audience. And even the advertisers want to advertise on stations that people listen. Because there's no point in advertising on any radio station if you know that the listenership of it is polarized or biased to a certain group.
Yes, on the other note, we also have social media, which is the mostly followed media currently in the country. And we have seen that most of the posts on social media, they are all about breaking stories, even without fact checking. So, what impact does that do on the country? And how can the LCA regulate that issue?
Okay, I think we have to start from saying internet from its inception, it wasn't designed for regulation. But as times move on, it became an important source of information. So what we need to do as LCA is to look at our legal frameworks and align them with the current era, but of course without compromising the freedoms of speech. And another thing that we'll be doing is to look at consumer education, because we believe it's through consumer education that will help the communities or the individuals to understand and be able to make proper judgment on what they read, not necessarily to believe whatever they read on the social media. So education is key. It's what will be driving it in terms of the awareness campaigns. And we are going to extend those awareness campaigns beyond just understanding issues on the internet. It's the consumer rights and obligations. That's what we'll be doing. We are also going to engage on child online protection awareness campaigns. We understand that the legal frameworks are really something that government would have to deal with in terms of the laws. But while they're still working on those, we can do a lot by making people aware of what to do and what not to do and how to protect their own children. Another issue that we'll also be dealing with is the issue of cybersecurity. Yes, there is still the bill that is yet to be enacted into law, but while the process is going on, we will be educating people about the cybersecurity awareness. It's all about safety, security, and trust on the cyberspace.
Yes, on that issue of the cybersecurity bill, I'll recall that there's been a lot of outcry from the media that is going to oppress the freedom of speech, which basically makes the law unconstitutional. So currently, what role is the LCA playing in ensuring that the law is balanced in a way that it does not infringe the people's rights, whilst also protecting the cyberspace?
I think what we should appreciate is that such laws are the responsibility of the government. And we expect that government will do what is necessary to ensure that it addresses the concerns. However, as LCA, we are always available to support the government through the ministry, through our parent ministry. Maybe in getting the consultations of or anything that they may require us to assist them with. But by and large, the responsibility lies with the lawmakers to pass that law.
And may I ask, did the LCA play any role in the composition of that bill?
Well, as one of the stakeholders, we were also present when the bill was prepared.
Uh, had you studied the maybe where in other countries where the law is in effect, and how did you find the effectiveness of the cyber security bill in other countries? If there was ever a study like that.
Well, what we did was, I think when we engaged stakeholders, we also, what I recall is that even the international partners were also there. So their presence also, we know that they have such laws in their country, in the Western world, and they work, of course, everywhere else. If you take a certain piece of legislation in another country, when you bring it home, you still have to kind of customize it and adapt it to the local environment. I believe that is the stage where we are now. Of course, the media here is saying maybe they see certain challenges, which other countries they might not. So it's a question of now adapting it to make sure that it fits well in our culture in Lesotho.
Okay. Going to the telecommunication sector,
Mm.
the the SIM registration issue. Since it was incepted last year and since its inception last year, how effective has it been? And mostly, why was it introduced the SIM card registration?
Uh, I'll take it a bit outside what your question
Okay.
and say we are in the fourth industrial revolution where there's basically digital transformation, and we can see, especially in the financial sector, that a lot of financial transactions are now happening online. And in Lesotho, we mostly depend on mobile communications because when you look at our statistics, we have more people really using mobile communications as a primary source of communication than fixed lines, which are by default registered because when you apply for a fixed line, you have to provide all those details. And when you are starting to look at the financial sector using the telecommunication platform as a medium for doing their business, if you have situations where you don't know who you are dealing with, you're opening up yourself as a country to a lot of fraudulent activities. So it's important to protect everybody by ensuring that we know who is who in the sense that the services you get, we know that they're going to you. So that was one of the reasons, the major ones. Of course, there are other issues where you find that when the numbers are not known, there was a lot of other activities that was happening in terms of the crime, which had to be addressed. So primarily, those were the reasons. Because when you look at it, if you go to apply for any service, let's say you want to open a bank account, they will want all those details. And periodically, they will say, keep on updating your details. And we were saying, here is the financial institutions that want this information. But now, where their banks are connected to, which is their customers, becomes unknown space. So it was a concern for us all that to ensure that the security of the financial transactions, we need now to put names against the numbers.
I remember that there's a case still pending before the High Court challenging the SIM registration issue. The The applicant in that matter argues that the law is going to be used to monitor people's movements, mostly for by the security agencies. And did the LCA consider that? And what's your view on that issue?
Well, I would say because now it's a matter in the courts of law, it may not be advisable to go in detail about that because it still has to be discussed, deliberated on by the courts. Yeah, at this point, I would be very conservative to divulge further details about that.
So basically, you won't be able to answer my next question about the mobile surveillance. Whether what's the LCA's view on the, because this basically is going to translate down into mobile surveillance, maybe by the NSS or the police themselves.
Well, not necessarily. Registering your SIM and mobile surveillance are two different things. Because surveillance is when you're monitoring movements of people from point A to point B or whatever. But registering your SIM is just knowing who you are. And the thing is, the networks are designed to provide service, not to track people. And those things, even if you are talking about them, you would have to have the appropriate laws for that. And we'll have, as far as I can recall, we don't have the intercept law in Lesotho.
And then the government is in the process. I don't know how far that process is of introducing the so-called smart city project.
Mhm.
Does the LCA have any say on the issue?
Well, I think when you look at the whole concept of smart cities, it comes from the International Telecoms Union, which is it's a driver of it,
Yes.
of which Lesotho is a member. So the concept of smart cities basically is, I would say, automating a lot of processes and making things easier for the people and control of a lot of utilities to make it easy for the communities to access and get the service and manage those services, even for the service providers. Yes, they heavily rely on the telecommunications networks. So if the government is going that way, the communication sector will have to respond accordingly depending on the technologies to be used. If maybe the government, when it's introducing the smart city concept, is going to need 5G technologies, that will be a reason to deploy 5G technologies. Because many countries are using 5G for that, other than maybe supplementing it with other fixed connections. So when we get there, our role as a regulator, as LCA, is to ensure that such networks are ready to support smart cities.
We currently have two telecommunications companies here in Lesotho, Vodacom and Econet. Does the LCA impose the tariffs which the two companies charge, or do they apply to the LCA to maybe to increase the tariffs also?
Well, they apply. Our legal framework currently is that they apply for the tariffs. But you'll realize that it's been more than 10 years. Or it's 10 years, it's more than that, since we had tariff increases. But they would not increase the tariff without authorization of the LC.
So they have to jointly add.
No, not jointly, individually.
Oh.
Yes. You will see it with these innovative ideas of them, the bundles. You don't necessarily have the same bundles for the two MNOs. Everybody looks at his business and say, this is what I can offer my customers. and they apply for them here, and we look at them that it doesn't make the consumer worse off. Because as a regulator, we have to ensure that we protect the consumers.
I also recall that the LCA opened doors for more telecommunications company to operate in Lesotho. Looking at our demography, how many communications companies do you think Lesotho can accommodate?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because it's driven by the business cases of the investors.
Wouldn't be there maybe congestion also?
Well, we have a smaller population, but yes, it would be best to have more players because then the environment becomes more competitive. But when you look at our terrain and maybe the levels of affordability, it's a question of whether the investors really, the level of opportunity they see in Lesotho versus other markets. That's what will bring the people here. But from the LCA perspective, we would like to see more than the two that we have. We still believe one of these days another one will come knocking and say, can I have a license? And when you look at the licenses, when you look at our licensing regime, you'll realize that we've opened up such that we don't have to advertise and say, okay, applications are open. The door is always open for someone who wants to start a business. And we've put different types of such services because even our rules allow for what we call mobile virtual network operators. Those ones that don't necessarily have to build their own networks but can use the existing infrastructure to have another communication service. But like I say, we are just hoping that one of these days an investor will come and knock and say, I would like to open up a business and be a third player.
Okay. We have seen that most Basotho residing on the borderlands of the country use South African networks. Does the LCA have any powers to regulatory powers on them?
Yes, we have an agreement with our counterparts in South Africa to manage that. We call it spillage because it's a signal coming, unlicensed signal coming from one territory to another. And what we are doing is to make sure that we minimize the impact of it. We understand that radio frequency spectrum does not really observe the borderlines because it's just signals. But they can be controlled to a certain extent, which is what we are doing. And it's something that we do every now and then. It's part of our work, daily work, to make sure that we minimize it. But we know we can't totally eliminate it, but we can bring it under control.
And let's go to the more personal aspect.
Oh.
You've been with the LCA for a very long time, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. How has been your stay here at the LCA, and what are the things that you wanted to change before you go to the helm of the LCA? Which you believe now that you will be able to change?
Okay. Well, I'll talk about now that I'm here.
Yes.
Because I would not be saying my predecessors were leading me in that way. But in a workplace, normally you follow the organizational strategy. So even those who came before us, me and the LCA had always had its own 3-year strategies, which have been part of in the implementation of it. The only difference this time is just that I just happen to be the one to lead our 3-year strategy that started in April. And by the way, it's available on our website if you want to have a look at it. So what I intend to achieve in the next, I think that was a question.
Yes, sir.
What am I going to do? Yeah, it was a question,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, the first thing is I want to improve on the regulatory system and technologies. And take a collaborative approach, because with the digital transformation and convergence of technologies, no institution can be able to effectively discharge its mandate in a silo, because there's a lot of overlaps. Because as the communication sector, we are basically the digital highway of the country, or the nerve center of the country in terms of connecting all points for all businesses to transact. And we need, why I'm saying collaborative, we need to be sure that whatever we are deploying out there in terms of technologies, it's what the market wants in order to drive their businesses, because basically we are providing them with a platform to transact and do business. Also, we are also looking at using relevant technologies in regulation, because the challenge with the sector that we are in is technology changes so fast, and we need to ensure that in terms of our human capital, in terms of the technologies that we are using to monitor the performance of the networks, are relevant. Secondly, what I would like to see at the end of the 3-year term that I'm in now is that we'll have a country where our citizens are very aware about cybersecurity matters and have a place where they can maybe ask questions about cyber-related issues. And basically it's saying, how do we set up ourselves as LCA in such a way that we can be able to identify threats, can be able to advise ourselves together with other regulators on how to deal with the cyber threats, because expertise and knowledge is only as good as when it gets shared. That's the only thing in life that if you share, it grows. Everything else, when you share, it gets smaller. But knowledge, yeah, it's a different one. So the other one I'm looking at is the issue of saying in these 3 years, we should have all our consumers in a better position to understand their rights, their obligations, and the services that they are being given. And I'll reiterate again the issue of child online protection. It's through awareness campaigns that we will be aggressive on to ensure that parents and children equally are able to understand what are the issues related to threats, the problems that, or the potential risks that the children face online. Because a lot of people at present maybe are not very conversant with what kind of potential problems are there. So that's what we'll be doing. The other issue that we need to address, that I intend to address, is the low internet usage. For example, we have more than 95% population coverage of 3G signal, which is what will provide you with basic broadband. But our internet usage is under 50%. So we are saying if we have more than 95% were covered with a broadband signal. Why is it that less than 50% only uses it? What are those 45% or so people using? So we need to also address that, whether it's maybe through awareness or through capacity building or through other means, but it requires a lot of collaboration with other agents, government ministries and other regulators. For example, we don't know the extent to which our education system can help address that. COVID has shown us that it doesn't take long before you really realize that you have to operate from home. And that those people who are not connected were the ones who were suffering during that time. So those are the things that we will be working on. And I think on that note, I'll say, yes, we will be revisiting our legal frameworks within the LCA and ensure that we align ourselves with the current era. It was a challenge with the regulation, our rules, and is that if you don't make them a living document, you may find yourself that they are no longer relevant to the current market requirements.
Yes, sir. And there's also this government databases, for example, the Home Affairs Identification Registry, and also the Safe Seat, which the Home Affairs was going to be is managed by Nikuv, which is a foreign company. The Safe Seat was going to be managed by Huawei, which is also a foreign country. So what are the risks of having foreign companies managing our databases such as those?
Well, while I don't have much information on the Nkuvu and the other one, I don't know how that will. My understanding is that the data is national data. Whether you have experts maybe assisting you with the operations of those systems, it all depends on the agreements. But like I'm saying, data is data and it's national data.
Won't we have problems where this data may be sold to our enemies elsewhere?
Well, like I say, technology is technology.
Yes.
And technology requires regulations or laws to limit what can be done with it. And one would not expect that we are dealing with companies that are unethical. Surely, like I say, I don't know much about the agreements, but I'm saying you can have information just like the bank has your information. It's a question of how safe they keep it. And one would have confidence in the Home Affairs that, yes, they're able to keep our data safe because they're the custodian anyway.
Yes, ma'am. Doesn't the LCA require those companies of that nature to have offices here in Lesotho so that if they infringe the law, they can be taken to task?
Well, I think that part may not necessarily be within the mandate of the LCA, because here you are talking about somebody who's coming to do certain businesses. Surely we don't regulate anything that says technology. For example, even in the agriculture, if you are really going in high-tech agriculture, you'll be having a lot of systems and machines that will be helping you manage your farm, whether it's a dairy farm or what. The only thing we'll do from our side is to make sure that the communication infrastructure is there to ensure that those technologies you use in your environment are able to communicate. Not necessarily to prescribe every piece of equipment that gets into the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that helps us our interview.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just to wrap up also, I would like you maybe to be aware of our cultural values. Okay, we have a very nice name for them. We call them ICAT. So our values are innovation, collaboration, adaptability, and transparency. So those are the values that we'll be subscribing to while we are pushing our 3-year strategy that I said is available on our website, to make sure that we have that as a basis for doing things. Because at the end of the day, it's all about making Lesotho a place where we can say our cyberspace is also trusted, and where we can look at it and say our connectivity in the country is meaningful. Meaningful meaning it adds value to the livelihoods of the people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.